Everyone, I'm Alistair Lewis, and I am the founder of Automated Data-Driven Design, or AD, as I like to call it. We wanted to create a community webinar, which is something that Arvinder and I have talked about for a while, as an environment where we can talk about technology and how it affects architects predominantly, because that's my background. And one of the focus areas to start with was generative design. So we're really keen to, I suppose, explore that in a friendly way, in a friendly environment, so it's not too heavy or technical. And I wanted to have a range of different voices here so that it isn't just architects talking to architects about how, architecture is amazing. So we're going to have different people on these webinars going forward. The aim is to do one once every 2 weeks. And we will have different people each week, each session, to join us and give their thoughts and views and experience into this. So today is the first one, so apologies if we're a little bit rusty because we're just getting to grips with it all. This is going out live on LinkedIn and also on YouTube live, which is interesting and scary. I'm hoping it's still working because I can't see from here, but it does say that we are live. So that's basically what we're doing today. So we're going to be talking about what is generative design and what that looks like, what that means, and just explore this a bit more. And what I would really encourage any of the people who may be viewing this to do is to ask questions, post comments, please get involved. I'd really like to hear what you think of this, whether it's something you're excited about or something that you're nervous about or something you may not have heard about at all, and you've got lots of questions, then please ask us. We are here to help, essentially. Right, I am going to allow Arvinder and Leo to introduce themselves. They're just going to give you a description of who they are, their role, where they work, and their experience and their kind of area of specialty. So I'm going to hand over to Arvinder first, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you, Alistair. That was a great intro. Hey guys, I'm Arvinder. I'm an architectural designer with about 5 years of experience in the industry. I'm currently working as a designer at Walker Consultants in Chicago. Outside of, I think, most places where you guys are chiming in from, because it's 7:30 a.m. here in the US. Outside of work, I have been working toward building my own architectural automation tools, one of them being an AI that automates architectural drafting. So yeah, happy to be here.
Amazing. And Leo.
Hi all. I'm Leo. I work in IT. I have a broad knowledge in software and hardware for design teams, predominantly in the AEC. I currently work at Architecture PLB as their IT manager.
Amazing. Okay. And you're super experienced.
Yeah, I have a little bit of experience, I guess. Yeah, I'll try and bring that to this forum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, amazing. Right. So what we have got some slides that kind of go with this, and I will bring them up now. The aim isn't to be kind of like, this is a PowerPoint, go through slides, but to use that through the discussions to either illustrate certain points or just to prompt us on what we should be talking about. So we talk about generative design. And we've talked a little bit about the aims, about creating a community, which is really good. So what is generative design? Arvinder, I'm going to pass it over to you to start on kind of what you think generative design is and what the kind of benefits are with that, and what your thoughts and experience are.
So I like to think of generative design as similar to natural selection or evolution. Definitely not the same. It's an evolutionary process of creating an iterative approach to design that can generate multiple solutions that fulfill some set of user set requirements, allowing architects, engineers, manufacturers, or any other designers to quickly explore various design options that optimize for factors that are relevant to that specific industry. So for architecture, that might be space, form, sustainability, or for developers, it might be like number of units that they're adding. So it's a very broad process that basically lets you define certain conditions and generate ideas based on those conditions.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen as well, is that you have there's a lot of generative design tools out there, and they've been growing over the last 5 years or so, and they all work in slightly different ways and do slightly different things. And we'll come on to some of those a bit later on, I think. But one of the key things here is about that control and putting in inputs into the software to develop your design or your massing study, whatever that is. Have you seen any sort of challenges with that in the sense that there are certain controls you can put into it and the software is then kind of iterating for you, but are there any sort of, I suppose, pros and cons to that?
I believe there's definitely constraints because so not all software is designed for all use cases. So when working on very specific projects, for example, if you're working on, let's say, a parking structure, there aren't many software that would help you design a parking structure per se, because it's a very niche use case and you would want a generative design process, or we do generative design processes in parking structures, let's say. It's a very specific use case that some software tools may not allow you to even model.
Yeah.
So
sorry, Karen.
No, go for it.
Well, I was going to just mention that a lot of them are focused around residential, because residential is the largest use case for buildings. So many of them are like, okay, we'll build a tool for residential planning, and we'll use that because it's clearly the biggest use case. But there are others which do focus around maybe hotels or hospitals or commercial buildings as well. So it does depend. In terms of the there is confusion out there, I think it's fair to say, about what is generative design and what is generative AI. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on that? I'm going to just switch the slides while you do that.
Yeah. This is a very fairly recent kind of advancement that's happening within AI, and generative design was coined like 10 years ago, while generative AI is something that's approaching more recently. So there's definitely a lot of confusion here. One way you can think of how generative design is different than generative AI is that generative design is much more rule-based and deterministic, which means that the same input will lead to the same output. While that is not exactly true for generative AI. I'm sure people have probably sent out the same prompts to ChatGPT and or even to Stable Diffusion models with generating images, and it always leads to slightly different, if not completely different results. And that's not exactly true for traditional methods in generative design, although that is changing as well with the introduction of AI in generative design, which is making all of this a lot more complicated than it has been. And generative design has user-defined parameters that you can have your designs optimized for, while with generative AI, it's a lot more. The training data is predefined and is inaccessible for the end user. So you're not able to tweak the model as much as you are with generative design.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, actually, in that I think the perception potentially with architects is that they're worried about control, about what inputs they put in and what you get out of it, and how you can then mold that to what you actually want. And with generative design, there's a lot more control than you may think about what the tool is doing, because you can set the parameters and set the inputs and say, I want it to do this within this set of criteria, whether it's size, massing, height, number of units, or whatever that may be. And with generative AI, exactly as you say, the data it's a black box, isn't it? Something's happening in there. You don't have any control over that. You just get to put an input in. You'll get something back. You can refine it from there with other prompts, but it's always going to be a bit of a dark art. And that was kind of where I was thinking about in terms of that control side of it. I was going to ask you, Leo, because from your background, we obviously know that generative design is a thing. I know of about 30 different generative design tools,
Mm.
and many are web-based, but some of them are hardware-based, so you have to install them on, Windows or Mac.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about managing that from an IT perspective for a practice?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, isn't it? I think, just as these programs kind of evolve and the requirements, we're seeing a lot of need to replace hardware and kit. It was a little bit easier before the pandemic. Now it's becoming a bit more challenging. As you say, most things are sort of pivoting over to web-based just to get accessibility sorted. But it's and costs are really critical as well at the moment. We're just finding allocating, it's hard enough just trying to figure out what the right software solution will be, and then trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it and the cost of all that kind of stuff as well. So it's definitely challenging, and I think it's something that we're still finding our way through. So we have kind of a task group and we're trying to figure out that, and then we're going to have to do some really important return on investment projects on it as well. It's a bit unknown at the moment.
Yeah, that's really interesting as well, because it's that whole idea about, do you adopt something? What advantage does it give you? And exactly, it's return on investment. What does that look like? Because many of these tools are software as a subscription, and they are per user per month basis. So what happens when you want more than 1, 2, or 3 people to use it in an office? How does that work? And equally, what happens if you don't adopt it? Architects do feasibility studies. We know that. They do competitions. We know that as well. But are these tools going to help us in that process? And the point I'm going to make here is someone last week on a test fit post where they had this amazing kind of algorithmic parametric model moving and changing things. They'd said, well, I'm an architect. I can do that much, much faster than a computer to a higher level of quality, which is true. But the tool can do it with a lot more iterations, much, much faster, particularly over, when you have a much more of a kind of an early stage blank slate. What do we do on this site? We've got some requirements. You can do that very, very quickly with this technology. But I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about, the pros, let's adopt it, or the kind of the more kind of cautious, well, let's just see how it goes.
I think that's the struggle here, right? Because we are just so early on into this. It's a nascent stage of the industry, and there's been as you mentioned, a Cambrian explosion, basically, of all these new tools coming up. So I do understand the industry being cautious about adopting some of these tools, and maybe not even seeing a lot of benefits from the current tools that are in the market. But that is not to say that there is no value that these tools are providing or will provide in the future. We are seeing a lot of diversity in what's coming up. And, there are definitely problems with any industry, any new industry that comes up. For example, a lot of the companies that are doing well may not even exist in the recent future. And there's definitely those long-term financial stability requirements that a lot of companies have and concerns about when adopting some of these tools. But it's all an iterative approach, similar to generative design. We're going to be testing out a lot of these new tools, and the dust is going to settle, and some clear, winners per se will emerge, which will really transform the industry into a lot more optimized workflow that works with architects rather than against them.
Okay, we've got a question here. I'm just going to show it on the screen for everyone. Okay, so here you go. For the uninitiated, is there a difference between generative design and computational design? Are they the same thing? Is one for automating processes?
I'd say it's the same thing as the uninitiated person in the room. Is it the same thing? Do I get a prize if it's right?
I'll let you answer, Arvinder, then I'll throw my thoughts in.
I think generative design is more specific, where it's mostly to iterate over multiple options or design options. So you are basically developing, 10 different options and selecting certain features you like from those options, and then regenerating, 5 different options. And it's that type of an iterative approach. Yeah, similar to the diagram that Leo is currently showing, or Alistair is currently showing. But computational design, on the other hand, is kind of similar to parametric design or algorithmic design, where you're working on specific parts of an already maybe chosen design to work with certain topography, or to create a specific type of, let's say non-rectilinear, maybe more curved based, or NURBS curve based form.
Yeah, so I'm gonna throw my thoughts in here. So I think that computational design is a more of a bespoke way of solving problems. So computational designers tend to be within larger organizations. They have skills which revolve around Dynamo, Python, Grasshopper, visual scripting, possibly C# and other scripting methods. And they tend to be more about solving bespoke problems on projects. So they go, okay, how do we build this? How do we design this facade, which is extremely complex, like you talk about, which has got, different planes and curves and things. And computational design is really good at solving that. Similarly, it might be about having a problem which needs a set logic applied to it, which can then be built into code that can then solve that challenge. I think generative design is basically very much about early stage iteration on a project using, we're talking about software which has been created for that purposes. You could build your own, a computational designer could build their own generative design tool in-house. And, when I was at MataLab, which is now Cope, they did that themselves. They built a tool which you could, it was a generative design plugin for Revit. But it's just that I suppose this next wave of generative design software is very much about software companies building these tools. We've got lots of comments on this. It's quite interesting. So I'm just going to throw them up on the screen so people can see that. So Bruno's saying he doesn't think it's the same thing. One generates new solutions based on limited inputs. Computation, on the other hand, is a fixed input, fixed output. Yeah, so it's got a kind of I say logic, but parameters to what it can do. Casper says computational design is when you apply computer calculations. Generative is when you provide parameters and requirements, and the system finds a solution for you. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so that's really good. That's really good. And then we have got another comment here. It's quite a long one, so we're going to get on here. Is architecture design really a visually biased process? Started my practice in 1987, I find that computational tools miss out on a lot of non-visual issues: ventilation, energy use, quantities, cost, even banal things like the area constraints that are set by the local government. Yeah, and it's interesting to mention cost in there as well, because for example, TestFit is a generative design tool, but I don't think it's marketed at architects. It's marketed more at real estate developers who want to understand the value of the site, or the possible resale, or how much it's going to take to develop it and things. Whereas there are other generative design tools which are more about designing, building design essentially on a site, and they're more architecturally focused. I'm not sure if I answered your question here. Is architectural design really a visually biased process?
I wonder if the point of the comment is mostly regarding these tools currently focusing a lot more on the design aspect or the aesthetic design aspect, rather than the functional or the technical side of architecture. And I do agree that that has been the case. It has been kind of the easiest implementation of computational approaches to architecture in the past 20 years. I think ever since parametric design has emerged, people have focused on creating, these, as I said before, like curvilinear facades and things that, are very complicated to do just by hand. If we were just still doing hand drawings. So
Yeah.
I do know that there have been new tools that are using computational approaches to optimize for energy uses and quantities, doing BODs, cost analyses, and even applying area constraints, like you mentioned, Sabu, on your comment, to designing or developing floor plans that comply with those local laws and zoning codes.
I like this idea of building faster with less stress, Alistair. Like, share a little bit more with that, because that roofing detail looks horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, so the tool that's shown on the screen is a company called Spatio, and they've got it's their tool is, I think, really interesting. There's a slide which shows it in use, so I'm just going to move forward to it.
Okay.
And yeah, here we are. So theirs is a much more kind of like parametric based, a much more moldable tool where you can move things around, create walls and buildings and roofs and things, whereas other tools are more like, here's a block, it's a representation of a unit, and that's about as much detail, whereas Spatio have gone into more detail, which is really nice, I think, particularly for architects who want to actually get much more of a feel for the development. And you can see how that's being shown on here. But yeah, that comment about less stress, I mean, the idea is that it should save us time because it gives us more options faster, and that allows us to make better decisions. That's the theory. And what's going to happen?
Yeah, you're right. And it does feel a little bit like, at the moment, it feels like all these, like the sessions that I sit on and stuff, it's just big companies are getting all these efficiencies. Like small companies, we're just not. I know that, we'll come on to it later in terms of like how maybe small practices can implement this stuff, but it's like that Spatio thing. It'd be great if they could just like plug it straight into SketchUp. Do you know what I mean? Just something like that we're already using at all, rather than it just feels like, we're a long way off that, unless you're a big practice.
But. So that's one of the key things I've been thinking about a lot recently is, if I started a practice now, what software would I use? And when
didn't you say Minecraft? Wouldn't we be building in Minecraft? That's great.
That's a really good idea, isn't it?
That is a really good idea.
But it's kind of more like, I was thinking that, Revit is, we know it's £6,000, must be like $7,500 a year. No new practice is going to start using that typically, because you just don't have that money when you start up. So when you start out, you're going to want to use tools which are much more cost effective, definitely in the short term. And if they are software as a subscription, potentially they're going to be a lot cheaper. So I've done some work looking at workflows where you look at, a generative design tool to do some early stage massing. You might then use something like Snaptrude, which is very similar to SketchUp, but is an advancement in that it's solid modeling and it's a lot more mature, I would say. Does all of your kind of area schedules and rendering in there as well. And then from there, you might go back into another tool, whether it's Rhino, or it might be into a space planning tool like Finch, or there's another one called Morphus, which is for office space planning, and Plan Finder as well. And then from there, you might go into another piece of software, which is your BIM authoring tool. But obviously, you'll be wanting to use something which is more cost effective than Revit. So what would that be? Rhino is an amazing tool, which is not expensive for what you can do, and you can do a lot with it in terms of creating, documentation essentially. Right. So I think that's where I would kind of see, the adoption of these tools. So you can see on the screen here, this is just all of these are the ones from my database.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different options out there. So there's a lot of, kind of, I suppose, opportunity out there to find the right one for you.
Yeah, totally.
We definitely need to talk to you about that, Alistair, because we don't have the time to we don't have the time or the resource to go out and research all these different products and see how they're all going to fit. I mean, that's why typically, we've kind of ended up adopting some of this technology basically through resellers and vendors who, they use their channel partners, and they essentially sell the product and say, look, all the architects are using this product. It's really good. You should try it. And that's really the way we're led into it in many ways, whether that be, all sorts of products, Enscape, IDA, all that kind of stuff. It's always been that way. But with this stuff, it just doesn't feel like there's anybody out there really shouting about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of orders the chaos, right? Like what you're showing on the screen currently. There's a lot going on, as I mentioned, and just having any sort of resource that combs through what's going on and what some of these companies are specifically working on, whether that makes sense for our architectural firm, is going to be big.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what you have on the screen, though.
Yeah. So this is where I do my. I'm the right person for that challenge now, because that's essentially where I position myself.
Yeah.
But essentially what I have done is that I realized that there were all these software out there. So this is just a cheat sheet essentially, and there's another slide later on with this in it, where I have collated them all together, found their key kind of functionality and areas that they work in, and I've put them into here, and I've also created a review of those as well in a report. And that's where I'm positioning myself essentially, is to help architects and clients to say, okay, there's all these things out there. I can help you find the best solution for you, because you're exactly right. We on a normal day-to-day basis, architects in practice don't have the time to do all this research. So I'm trying to say that I could do this for them and then share that knowledge back. And, we're going to talk a little bit today about the report I've built, reviewing all of these different software and putting it into one document so that people can purchase that off the ad marketplace. And the report will be going out it's going to be early March. It's nearly ready, but it's going to be early March. And I have got a thing here, which you can, if you want to find out more about that, then you can sign up to the newsletter on the website, and then you'll get an email when it's released. But the idea is that you can see here, like looking at all the costs of the software, what the differences are, looking at it from different points of view. So from a developer point of view, as opposed to architects. And then, this is a cheat sheet, which will be made available as well for people to use. And this will be free, is the idea, so that people can just have a really quick overview of all the tools out there. And when they want this more in-depth part of it, then the report will be there for them as well. But I think there's clearly a lot more to do in the future on this to help practices. And I've been doing that over the last year or so. And I'm really hopeful that people want to buy this report. It's a bit of a mystery, but I'm going to put it out there to help the industry as much as possible.
And we're going to go into a bit of detail, aren't we? Like looking at, because I'm interested in the practical implementation of this stuff. We've got challenges at the practice. We want to try and solve them. I'm looking forward to getting into the nitty gritty of it, basically getting the software working, get the teams using it, and actually really seeing what the return can be. Yeah. Rather, see if all this GD stuff will actually translates to some savings somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I think, I don't know if we touched on about maturity of the software yet, but I've tried to describe in there that there are different levels of maturity. So TestFit is an incredibly mature software. It's been around for quite a long time. It's got a big team. It's got lots of funding. They have a lot of clients using it in the US. It's just very mature. But then there's everything else in between, from quite new players on the market that are not quite as mature, and then there's kind of ones in the middle, and again, they're focused on different areas. So finding the right solution for an architect or a project, there probably is something out there, but that level of maturity will differ depending on the type of software, and that's one of the challenges for the industry, is that we don't like uncertainty, maybe, and there will be uncertainty with some of these tools as their roadmap gets delivered over time. They will update and change, and Arvinder, you've said already that some may not be around in a couple of years because funding dries up, or there isn't the adoption, or there's lots of different reasons that they're not successful. But you have to just kind of make the best judgment we can with the information available at the time. We're just going just over half an hour. There was another comment someone made. Just bear with me. Sabu again. I'm just going to fill it in here. Design requires to support the character ethic and not the personality ethic. It is what is inside, not visual, that really matters, both in human beings and buildings. Yeah, and I fundamentally agree with this, is that building performance is what we're really looking for. We're not necessarily worried about I'm not necessarily worried about what it looks like, because style is, it can be, it's completely subjective. But we want the performance of buildings to be super high. So if we can design buildings with better sustainability from a super early stage, and many of these generative design tools have sustainability metrics built into them, that's going to be much, much better for the industry. I mean, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that at all.
More of a production architect. So, I have been someone who's been trained as an architect, but don't care as much about the aesthetics per se, just because the aesthetics don't really define the experience that the person actually has with the building. The building you're occupying can look as amazing as it can be, but if it's inconvenient in any way, you're not going to have a great time in that. And then if it obviously affects sustainability or promotes climate change, that's not good for us anyway. So
so Leo, I'm just going to touch on the end here, just so because I think it's really interesting that you are an IT manager.
Why? I don't think it's interesting at all.
But I generally do, because it's really important as part of this conversation, because Arvinder and I can get as excited as we want to about software, but
and you do.
We have to install it, and it has to run, and it has to work well. So what I'd like maybe from you is just maybe your sort of 3 things to think about, or something. What would your thoughts be for people who may be watching this webinar and saying, okay, I want to try software? What do they need to think about in terms of the hardware, the infrastructure behind everything?
Yeah, good question. Get your IT team on board first, I guess, because you're going to need them. I mean, cost. Yeah, budgets and cost is a really big thing at the moment. I mean, we all want these efficiency improvements. We all need to kind of deal with that. That's my biggest headache, I think, with it. The Autodesk thing is always just a bit of a sting in the tail. It's so expensive. That's what we're all using at the moment, and plugins. But I actually had a quick look at our deployment tools the other day, and it's so complicated. The what do you want to call it? The work base, the workflow we've got with applications and plugins is massive. Like building compute, I think there was we're quite a small practice, and I think I've got 25 plugins for Revit.
Wow.
Yeah, and every time, I know it's a very, very Revit thing, but every time we upgrade, all the plugins need to be upgraded, they need to be pushed out, and then there's compatibility problems and drivers and all sorts of stuff, and the IT team's just running around dealing with that, and that's a headache. So it's kind of, I'm hoping, whenever you say to me, oh, it's web-based, I'm always like, great. I hope it works. And licensing terms, EULA terms for usage, all that kind of stuff. It's just trying to get your head around all that. And that's why I kind of hope, like, when we go through the sessions, this series, we can kind of start unpacking that and going, oh, actually, this is really easy to deploy and it kind of works, and we're all licensed correctly and we've got the tools to maintain license correctly, all that kind of stuff. It's it's all the back end bits that need thinking about as well.
Yeah. And Arvinder, I kind of asked from your perspective what you think sort of the key things to think about with this software.
I mean, I think, for me, it's been kind of understanding the playing field a lot more, and what's out there and what can we do? What can we get started with now? I wouldn't want to, if I was a new firm, I wouldn't want to invest in a large team of, software engineers or developers trying to create in-house tools. I'd like to see what I can get started with today, because there's, as Leo had mentioned, larger firms are already using this for their own advantage, and I don't know if it's going to bring costs down for them, and it's going to make a lot more competitive industry, and it's already very competitive with the prices. So I'd be really curious to understand that. And then test these tools out. I don't know, Alistair, if you can talk about whether there are demos or trials that some of these tools offer that can be employed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So some of them have trials. Some you're able to access for free, and you can start using them. Some are more gated, and you have to sign up to an account, and maybe you have to sign up and pay for the first month's usage or things like that. So I spoke to one company, and they said basically we only want paying people because we don't want time wasters. From their perspective, I mean, but that it makes sense from their point of view. They were like, people who come in, if they want to use it, they're going to pay for it, and then we can service them properly, and it's a good relationship. Whereas with free trials, there is a bit of, I mean, I've been guilty of this: sign up for a free trial and then not do anything with it. So, and they've obviously got, from the back end of it, they've got to kind of manage all of that, those environments and accounts and stuff. So, but again, a lot of startups are like, we just want people to start using the tool, so it's free. So it's tricky. But I think what I'd really like to do is maybe on the next session is we have a look at 2 or 3 of these. And maybe we could have a play around with them and explore how it works. So I'm thinking, for example, like HiPAR is a really interesting tool for space planning, and it'd be a nice one to start using, and possibly even maybe looking at Spatio or possibly TestFit, because TestFit is you have to install it on your computer, basically. We might not be able to get access to that, actually, thinking about it. But I think that would be a nice thing to do. I've just got one more. We've got a question here from Sophie. Hi. Can you talk a bit about the exchange formats that we expect from these software? It seems to be an issue for broader adoption of feeling control of our workflows. Excellent question.
Yes, excellent. It's a nightmare. Hate it.
Yeah.
Everything should be exported as like a whatever the Microsoft Word extension is. There you go, done. Honestly,
I have actually done quite a bit of work around this, looking at all the different, because on that sheet that I shared earlier, it has all the export options from those software, and they're all different, which is why I've put them into a diagram which shows what comes out of them, basically. So that will be in the report, and it will be on the cheat sheet as well.
Can you remember the most convoluted roundabout way of getting data in and out? Have you got that on the report? You would have come across it though, because some of it must be absolutely horrendous.
So some are quite closed, so that they don't export much. So Archistar, for an example, it may have changed, but I think you can get a PDF report out of it, or a DWG. Now, if they want to correct me, please do. But it's quite a closed system in that respect. Whereas Schema, for example, they export to SketchUp, to Revit, to IFC, to DWG, they've got loads of options to Rhino as well, and that's like amazing. That's great because you can see, you could plug into other things, and Snaptrude as well. Though it's not a pure generative design tool, they're looking to connect with other software as much as possible. And this is where software like Speckle become quite interesting, because they build connectors from one environment to another. So, ArchiCAD to Revit, or Revit to Tekla, or whatever. And Speckle are doing some really amazing things in that area, which helps the industry. And Tom's here. Hi, Tom. He said big one is interoperability between tools. Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, I've mapped a lot of those, but I would see Speckle in this area being one of the key players in the future, because they are able to build tools that connect the API between the two tools and allow you to transfer quickly and easily. Arvind, I don't know if you've got some thoughts on that as well.
No, I think what you guys have said is pretty much what I was thinking. There's a clear need, right? There's a clear need to standardize all of the export options and all of the, the way we are working with these designs in our computers, basically. Like, we need standard ways or file systems to do this. PDF did that, with textual format. And I think we need to do that with BIM, and also BIM on one side, but much more freeform tools like Rhino, SketchUp. And there's OBJ, but I don't know, FBX. I don't know if they cover all the requirements of an architectural design, but I don't know if you guys have thoughts about whether there's any file formats that could be good contenders for such a standardization.
I'll tell you what, I don't have anything positive to actually add, unfortunately, but I have been dealing with our archiving system recently. And what's the term now for architects? I used to work 15 years. Now I'm working to like 30. And
really?
Yeah, and as you said, like when I'm looking back through the archives back to the 90s, Word docs, Office docs, and MiniCAD stuff. I've got hardware that I can still maybe spin up and read some of the old MiniCAD data. And then we're talking about the whole range of this new workflow with like IFCs and all these other extensions. And I'm thinking, okay, let's chuck the clock 15 years into the future. How am I going to be able to open any of this data? How am I going to read any of this data? And just with our backup system as well, because obviously cybersecurity is an absolute nightmare at the moment. And we're having like proactive detections on stuff, and it's like, and I'm getting these reports saying, oh, the backups are all infected, and I'm looking at them, and it's reading archive data from 15 years ago that thinks it's some sort of malware, and it's just the extension just back in the day was something a bit weird, because it was on a Mac or something, and I'm just like, yeah, so that does really worry me. I wonder where we're going to be.
Yeah. And just on this, also in the terms and conditions for these generative design companies, it's worth reviewing those to find out what you own and what you don't own. Like, for example, Autodesk format is pretty comprehensive, that they kind of own everything and they can do what they like with your data. Whereas other companies are much more forgiving, I suppose, and say, well, it's your data, it's your intellectual property, and you own this. But that is it's an issue that architects need to consider, because if they're doing bespoke, beautiful designs and suddenly they don't own the IP for it. There weren't many companies that were, and I'm not saying Autodesk is like that, but Autodesk is super like locked down in terms of they can do anything pretty much with your data. So whereas other companies weren't quite the same.
It's a similar conversation to what's going on in the broader field of AI, where a lot of data from the internet is being used to train large models and produce IP stuff from from people's own products and creativity. So the art world is seeing a huge shakeup from all of that as well. And I wonder if that's going to affect, or has started to affect the architectural world as well.
Yeah, and you're getting into generative AI again there, aren't you? They take all this data, whatever it's been trained on, and then it's being reused. And if that's artistic data or architectural designs, you know, and then someone else uses it, how do architects get recompensed for that? Because it's their intellectual property. And I'm sure there will be more legal cases that come through which challenge that. And we'll see what the outcome is of it. We have done a good 45 minutes there, so I'm going to bring this to a close. I want to thank you both, Arvinder and Leo, for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all the viewers who are here, who have commented and inputted as well. It's really valuable. If you want to reach out after this, then please do. This is my contact email. And if you want to speak to Leo or to Arvinder, you can find their details on LinkedIn. Or reach out to me, and I will send you their details, because they're both amazing people, and they can help you with your any challenges,
Any.
They will solve them for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've really enjoyed that. I appreciate that a lot. You've both been here, and yeah, let's do this again in 2 weeks, and we'll catch up then.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Take care.